I'm going to begin with a poem I didn't even plan to read, but because Robert just read directive to us, and this sonnet lifts a line from that poem, I'll start here. I wrote this poem for my friend Jill, who is a colleague at BU. She teaches through the Metropolitan College in the prison program that BU offers degrees gradually to prison inmates in Massachusetts. And it's hard work sometimes for her, and also hard for her to resist sometimes looking up information in the public domain about, her students, sometimes feeling terrified, sometimes feeling really invigorated, and certainly always incredibly committed to that work. I don't know how much that contributes, my telling you that, but I'm going to tell you guys some stuff about the poems, I guess, between. Bath. This is a sonnet. The last line you'll recognize. It's not mine. Bath for Jill. Here is the porcelain tub, expectant, cool. Its ledges lined with lavender and lemon, labeled jars of mud and salt and oil, milled soaps that smell of rose or melon, oatmeal scrub and peppermint shampoo, black wedge of pumice, ocean sponge, a bristled brush with oaken handle, all for you who love abundance of particulars. Now turn the H and let the rising vapor cloud the aging tiles and oval mirror. Make tea or a martini, grab the paper or a yellowed novel, tie your tumbling hair, and watch as the tipped liquid turns to lace. Here are your waters and your watering place. I'll read one section of a 3-section poem. The sections are sort of meant to stand apart, but the title is Three Dog Night. 1. I held the retriever in the dream like a bouquet of lilies, the yellow weight of her will-less. In my pocket, a flap of ear, another loved dog's, a broken-off paw. See, I told the man at the scale, it's been very hard. I argued that the dogs once weighed more than the parts I'd managed to keep. Not enough, he said, as the sun began to rise. You see, your girl is coming back to life, and sure enough, the dog fell from the counter, flopping like a fish, unfolding, glowing. I have suffered, I said, hushing the dog, who was now standing upright, holding my hand. Not enough, he said. Your other dead? I have photos, I told him. You will have more. Dogs, I asked him. Dogs just get you in the door. I'll read a couple Texas poems. Do we have anyone from Texas this year? I didn't think so.
I was born in San Antonio.
Okay, oh, there you go. Well, then I feel more comfortable saying that I hate Texas. I always did. My in-laws live there in Dallas. I hate Dallas. It's awful, concrete, driving everywhere forever. Ick. But my husband got a fellowship at the University of Texas in Austin, and we lived on this little ranch all by ourselves in the middle of nowhere for 6 months in the hill country outside of Austin, and I loved it there. So I love part of Texas, and this is about that time. Paisano in Spanish means peasant, really, or countryman. But where we were, the ranch was called Paisano, and in that part of the country meant roadrunner, the bird. A chuckwill's widow, I'll tell you, is a cousin of the whippoorwill, and I should tell Heather about this bird if she doesn't know, but that's the call it makes. It doesn't say potato chips or cut it out. It says chuckwill's widow, this kind of thing. And seeing a rabbit rather than a man in the moon is a Mayan tradition. Paisano. The clouds still differentiate the dark. At nearly midnight, light they incubate makes silver nightshade bloom between the stars. The day I saw a jackrabbit is ending for its only time, so I know more than when these clouds were born a blown time ago. Midnight, the porch hovers and we lean in chairs with glistening bottles, move our arms, our mouths, but not to kiss and not to speak. The dog boxes a June bug with his shadow like a fox. It's Texas. Now and then a star will blaze a trail past here to where it goes. A bird will summon Chuck Will's widow, though she'll never come, as I have called a ghost who's lost someone. There is no room for that old desolation here. The house is small, the pasture rough with things to find. The night is kindly lit, and you are kind. And what will happen is another day. The rain lily will spring beneath the wheel. The flycatcher will poke its crested head out of the Martin house. I know these names and saw a scarlet wasp above the prickly pear. I saw the place the star made when it fell. I saw you say, I love you to the dark, and watched a fast shape dive into the light of the rabbit hole in Mexico, the moon. This is my only poem thus far that cites chapter and verse, Matthew 6:19-21. And I deliberately did not provide the verses as an epigraph in the poem, but I'll say the lines from King James for you if I can. Matthew 6:19-21. Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal. For where thy treasure is, there will your heart be also. Thy is yours. I might have messed it up a little bit. You get the point. Matthew 6:19-21. Hold off a while, moth and rust and thieves, for I love this world. My heart is here, where a body breathes. I've seen such treasures, even of your making. Night's wool, the frayed holes light comes through. Burnt sky cracking, the corroded ocean, October's the sun goes. Thieves have taken grief, and the thing one hated most. So keep your work up elsewhere, leave me my store. The young geologist radioed, this is it, before St. Helens sank him, seized in a dream, treasure of rupture and force. What does one fear if not a loss? How do days in the next world pass? Nothing to tend, nothing you're up against, no moth, no rust. O Lord, let there be thieves among the angels. I resist the idea that I write domestic poems, and yet I write domestic poems. To me, a lot of what's most interesting in a life, most political, most charged, happens beneath the roof of a house or of particular houses. So I'll read a couple poems that I wouldn't usually introduce in that way, but what the hell. I'm nervous. I think it's because the video. Okay. Thanks. I'm not usually nervous. Okay, Perpetual Between. A book a hinge, the page a hinge, the mind this way and that a hinge. Your hand opening the music of the instrument, a hinge, the instrument a hinge, the mood hinged upon the song a hinge, and you and I, O metaphysicians, hinges. The body hinged, the jaw, the lids, the valves, the house a hinge, holding things in and out. The moment opens, closes, the night, the clock, the thought, the heart, the door, the breath. That's a poem in one-line stanzas. The only I've written that way. This is The Yellow House, 1978. The kitchen in the house had a nook for eating, a groove for the broom behind the door, and the woman moved through it like bathing, reaching ladles from drawers, turning to lift the milk from the refrigerator while still stirring the pudding, as if the room and everything in it were as intimate to her as her body, as beautiful and worthy of her attention as the elbows which each day she soothed with rose lotion, or the white legs she lifted again and again in turn while watching television. To be in that room must be what it was like to be the man next to her at night, or the child who, at 6 o'clock, had stood close enough to smell the wool of her sweater through the steam, and later, at the goodnight kiss, could breathe the flavor of her hair, codfish and broccoli, and taste the coffee, which was darkness on her lips. And listen then from upstairs to the water running down, the mattress drifting down the river, a pale moon mark on the floor, and hear the clink of silverware, the stars, their distant speaking, and picture the ceiling, the back of a woman kneeling, covering the heart and holding up the bed and roof and cooling sky. It's hard for me to read that poem without laughing, and if my husband were here, I wouldn't have been able to do it because he knows the story of my mother. She's seen the poem, it's in the book, but I gave it to her at one point years ago, just after I'd written it. And at some point she was mad at me, and this must, months later, and she says, "Oh yeah, that's me, old cod, broccoli breath." And I said, that poem's not about you, Mom. It wasn't the breath either, it was the hair, the snake. Immortalized. Okay, I'll just read a couple more, maybe 3 or so. Since we're a group of teachers, this is, there's a series of 3 poems in my book that come out of a time that I spent in the Dominican Republic when I was 16 and very green and very Midwestern and naive. And I went home, I think, less Midwestern and less naive. Altos 2. Light crested as the leaves moved from green to green like breathing. From the roof, jungle, cane, and sea moved to the rhythms of wind, sickle, and tide. Various bodies, none more naked than the pink, transparent lizards whose entire workings, gut, muscle, and vein, were visible to the naked eye as they climbed the walls visible through them. Evenings, music, and the hard-working moon. So many chinks and spaces through which to make patterns. Bodies moved together in patterns toward nakedness. Beneath us, the cats brawled, fucked, and cried like babies, cried so high and deep the music couldn't drown them out. Now and then, a mango fell with a thud, or a giant moth made shapes against the flames. Among the welcome elements, not one thing did not hunger to be changed. The heat held still between us. This is short poem written in terza rima. And I'll just say, because a couple of you have asked me, and I'm moved by the question and a bit embarrassed by the answer, but I don't know. The poem is titled Prayer to a Suicide. The first word in the poem is brother. We've talked some during the course of this institute about poetic voice and who is speaking. And in my mind, in this poem, the speaker is not me. I did not lose a brother to suicide, but I did lose a dear friend to suicide. So I don't get to explain that very often, except kind of person to person when people ask me. That said, short poem, terza rima. Some of the elements of the rhythm of this poem come out of a Catholic tradition. Prayer to a Suicide. Brother, when they laid you down, I touched the break in lashes where the chicken pox had blown the lid up long ago, small brushes that stroked out your seeing hours. I wish the clouds would wash us down with unrepentant power, that pounding rain would soak into your newly opened grave. Our mother's breath is broken. Her sea scar tingles after many years. Our father has not spoken. All night the faucet drives hard tears down into the silent house. They say it is beyond repair. Wherever you are, cry for us. So I'll end with a poem titled Kempi. Kempi, some of you know I had twins a year ago, and so I wasn't at the Institute last year. They just turned one, Lionel and Kempi, and this poem comes out of a time when I didn't think that maybe I was going to have the kids that I'd always sort of imagined and given names to, and this kind of thing. Kempi. The name is from a folk song called Mole in the Ground, and my husband and I realized that we've doomed our daughter to spelling her name her whole life. People say Tempe, like Tempe, Arizona, or Campy, and I think we didn't think it was that weird. Her brother's name is Lionel. Kempi. When I was like you, no one spoke to me. For a while, I'd see you only while I slept, smoky reels of silent family films, often on your birthday. Not anymore. You're cartwheeling past the window now, brown shoes flickering like birds. Knock-kneed with small teeth and a laugh like a rifle shot, too big for your britches, kid. If you're so smart, what's taking you so long? So the universe is huge. Plenty of people find their way. There's a picture you drew on the fridge, a blue walrus. There's a story you wrote about a kangaroo. Look, take any room. I'm sorry I resisted giving up the study. Let's put it behind us. Remember when you didn't have the croup? I stayed up all night making steam. Remember when you didn't win the spelling bee? We were so proud. Dust and stars, the roads between the moon and sun, the spokes of light wheeling through the room. Where are you living? I keep missing you, stubborn girl. If you're waiting for some better future, it's too late. You've got a mother, Kempi, and you've got a name.
Who knows, possibly someday Kempi will write a poem about what she smelled on her mom's hair. She won't be able to imitate her mom's Wisconsin voice. It was very, very beautiful, Maggie. It was a wonderful reading. I'll try to make my reading personal in the sense that I'm very aware of you all and this favorite poem thing, bringing out things in me to do with other people that I don't think was absolutely natural to me. And it endlessly amuses me to deal with teachers and talk to teachers as a sort of drastic underachiever in school myself. I'm always embarrassed to say this because it's so much like, at this point, it's almost like bragging. In the 8th grade, in middle school, I was in the dumb class. And it had a kind of permanent effect on me. And I can't tell you to this day exactly why I found it impossible to do anything I was asked to do. I can remember, I hope that what I'm doing is pleading you for understanding for a certain kind of child that you come in contact with. I can remember reading the history textbook for pleasure, but not the parts that were assigned. And if I found I accidentally had stumbled onto a part that was assigned, a kind of electric shock would go through my body. I almost did homework. And I was the kid in the class who prayed for a pop quiz rather than something, preferably on something we had never discussed or had never been assigned. One of the reasons I love talking to you is that I feel a sort of healing aspect of that quality of just hating other people, hating school, feeling, as people were kind enough to point out, destined to be a bum. And it improved over the years. By the end of high school, it wasn't too bad at all, but there were years when I really did worry about being a derelict and would study winos to see how bad it would feel. So I'm going to read some short poems to you that related, in my mind, to this thing of how you related to other people. And this poem basically says, I don't need you. I'm not going to be involved with you. And in order to say that, I name every relationship, every category of relationship there is in order to say how tough I am and how I'm without other people. The poem is called Samurai Song. Samurai Song. When I had no roof, I made audacity my roof. When I had no supper, my eyes dined. When I had no eyes, I listened. When I had no ears, I thought. When I had no thought, I waited. When I had no father, I made care my father. When I had no mother, I embraced order. When I had no friend, I made quiet my friend. When I had no enemy, I opposed my body. When I had no temple, I made my voice my temple. I have no priest. My tongue is my choir. When I have no means, fortune is my means. When I have nothing, death will be my fortune. Need is my tactic. Detachment is my strategy. When I had no lover, I courted my sleep. That formula for that poem, when I this, I this, when I this, I that, by the way, was inspired by a favorite poem reading. I've attended, there have been thousands of them around the country. I attended one in Kansas, and a man who was a welder by profession read a 14th century Japanese poem that had that formula. And I was so taken by the formula that airplane home from Kansas, I stole it. Very important to me in the period that I've described to you, where I think in my mind, I'm speaking partly to you as my teachers when I was young, and I'm speaking to you as one of your students. Very important to me was music. It gave me a social identity, and it was the one thing I could do properly. By high school, in my graduating class, definitely not most literary boy, and absolutely not most likely to succeed, but I was voted most musical boy. And the saxophone was immensely important to me. It was a very fashionable instrument at the time. It was kind of Byronic and glamorous instrument. And it gave me something I didn't have by other means. And it remains to me a very important symbol of culture. It was invented by a European named Sachs, Adolf Sachs, and it is clearly not a European instrument in the sense that it's an American instrument. It's a black American instrument because it was made so by geniuses named Charlie Parker and Lester Young and Johnny Hodges and Dexter Gordon. They made it their instrument, which is what we're trying to do for our students. Poetry, the 17th century, the English language, history of the Civil War, medieval verse epitaphs. What you're trying to do for the child is say, you can make this your instrument. This can become instrumental for you. I think I've indicated to you that I'm patriotic about America's hybrid, mixed quality as a culture. Saxophone's an example of it. The poem is called Ginza Samba. There is a tune called Ginza Samba. Ginza, of course, is Japan. Samba is Brazil. In the record I have, it's played by the white Jewish jazz musician, Stan Getz, and it's written by an Italian guy, I believe, named Charlie Venturi. Ginza Samba. A monosyllabic European called Sachs invents a horn. Walla whirlity wah, a kind of twisted brazen clarinet, but with its column of vibrating air shaped not in a cylinder, but in a cone, widening ever outward, and boah, spouting infinitely upward through an upturned, swollen golden bell rimmed like a gloxinia, flowering in Sax's Belgian imagination, and in the unfathomable matrix of mothers and fathers, as a genius graven humming into the cells of the body, or cupped in the resonating grail of memory, changed and exchanged, as in the trading of brasses, pearls and ivories, calicos and slaves, slave laborers and slave girls, two cousins in a royal family of Niger known as the birds or hawks. In Christendom, one cousin's child becomes a, quote, favorite Negro, end quote, ennobled by decree of the Tsar, and he founds a great family, a line of generals, dandies, and courtiers, including the poet Pushkin, killed in a duel concerning his wife's honor, while the other cousin sails in the belly of a slave ship to the port of Baltimore, where she is raped and dies in childbirth. But the infant will marry a Seminole, and in the next chorus of time, their child fathers a great hawk or bird, with many followers, among them this great-grandchild of the Jewish manager of a Pushkin estate, blowing his American breath out into the wiggly tune uncurling its triplets and sixteenths, the Ginza Samba of breath and brass, the reed vibrating as a valve, the ether, the unimaginable wires and circuits of an ingenious box here in my room in this house built 100 years ago while I was elsewhere. It is like falling in love, the atavistic imperative of some one voice or face, the skill, the copper filament, the golden bell full of notes twirling through their invisible element from Rio to Tokyo and back again, gathering speed in the variations as they tunnel the twin-haunted labyrinths of stirrup and anvil, echoing here in the hearkening instrument of my skull. Another poem about an instrument, a piano I loved very much. I said I would be personal. A key central event in my childhood was my mother fell on her head and had a severe concussion when I was 11. And it meant an even stranger phase for someone who was what Mel Brooks would describe as very, 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 very nervous. I never know how seriously, whether to speak or write about this comically or tragically. Sort of like, what do you do, fall on your head? Well, in fact, yes. you ought to see a psychiatrist. Well, yeah, but it wasn't that kind of social ambience. And my sister was present when our mother fell. And my sister really gave me this poem. I very typically was not present. Everyone else in the family was there. She fell. I very typically was home in this tiny apartment. They had 3 children in a 2-bedroom apartment, and they had this immense piano. And I spent all my time banging at that piano. And my sister said what she could remember was, she couldn't remember the fall. Her earliest memory is they're carrying our mother into the apartment and seeing me, my back, and think, now Robert's going to know. Now Robert's going to know our mother. She didn't know she was going to live or die. And that image brought me back to the piano, which, as you'll see in the poem, is a peculiar piano. And my mother was in some ways replaced by the piano. And my sister reminded me of physical things about the piano that I had sort of forgotten. The first word of the poem is a trademark. The green piano. The green piano. Aeolian. Gratis. Great thunderer. Half-ton infant of miracles torn free of charge from the universe by my mother's will. You must have amazed that half-respectable street of triple-decker families and rooming house painters the day that the bowl-ankled, oversized hams of your legs bobbed in procession up the crazy-paved front walk, embraced by the arms of Mr. Puppick, the seltzer man, and Coradon, his black-skinned helper, tendering your thighs thick as a man up our steps. We are not reptiles. Even the male body bears nipples, as if to remind us we are designed for dependence, nutriment and dependence, past into future. O Europe, they budged your case, its ponderous guts of iron and brass, 10 kinds of hardwood and felt, up those heel-pocked risers and treads, its splintering tinder, angelic nurse of clamor, yearner, tinkler, dominator. O elephant, you were for me. When the tuner, Mr. Otto van Brunt, pronounced you excellent, despite the cracked sounding board, we obeyed him and swabbed your ivories with hydrogen peroxide. You blocked a doorway and filled most of the living room. The sofa and chairs dwindled to a ram and ewes, cowering. Now the colored neighbors could be positive that we were crazy and rich, as we thought the people were who gave you away for the moving out of their carriage house. They had painted you the color of pea soup. The drunk man my mother hired never finished antiquing you, ivory and umber, so you stood half done, a throbbing, mistreated noble, genuine, my mother's swollen livestock of love, lost one, unmastered. You were the beast she led to the shrine of my genius, mistaken. Endlessly, I bonged according to my own chord system, humoresque, the talk of the town, what I say. Then, one day, they painted you pink. Pink is how my sister remembers you, the Saturday afternoon when our mother fell on her head. Dusty pink, as I turn on the bench in my sister's memory to see them carrying our mother up the last steps and into the living room, inaugurating the reign of our confusion. They sued the builder of the house she fell in. With the settlement, they bought a house at last. And one day, when I came home from college, you were gone, O mahogany breast, who nursed me through those years of the concussion. And there was a crappy little Baldwin Acrosonic in your place, gleaming, walnut shell. You were gone, despoiled one, pink one, forever green one, white and gold one, comforter, a living soul. The recent book, Gulf Music, has a section in it called First Things to Hand, in which the rule is the next thing I touch, I have to write a poem about it. I have to write a poem about a podium or a water bottle or CAT5 cable or something. And then you start writing about it. The podium is oak, and the point is not that ordinary experience is beautiful and poetic, but something more like that anything that the human intelligence focuses on can become a portal into the entire universe. Almost anything can lead you into history and indeed into society, into other people, so that a solipsistic or escapist or narcissistic concentrating on your music or your book or your life or whatever, it's a doorway into the whole world. It's a doorway into everybody you know and don't know and all the past. That was the talking before the poem. This is the poem. I'll read 2 or 3 of these. Here's a poem called Book. Book. Its leaves flutter. They thrive or wither. Its outspread signatures like wings open to form the gutter. The pages riffling brush my fingertips with their edges, whispering erotic touch, this hand knows from ages back. What progress we have made. They are burning my books, not me, as once they would have done, said Freud in 1933. A little later, the laugh was on him, on the Jews, on his sisters. Oh, people of the book, wanderers under us. When we've wandered all our days, said Walter Raleigh, time shuts up the story of our days. Raleigh beheaded, his life like a book. The sound book, lips then palate, outward plosive to interior stop. Book, book. The beech tree, pale wood incised with Germanic runes. Enchanted wood, glyphs and characters between boards, the reader's dread of finishing a book, that loss of a world. And also the reader's dread of beginning a book, becoming hostage to a new world, to some spirit or spirits unknown. Look, what thy mind cannot contain, you can commit to these waste blanks. The jacket ripped, the spine cracked. Still it arouses me, torn, crippled God, like Loki the schemer, as the book of Lancelot aroused Paolo and Francesca, who cling together even in hell, oh passionate. So we read. Love that turns or torments or comforts me, love of the need of love, need for need, columns of characters that sting sometimes deeper than any music or movie or picture, deeper sometimes even than one body touching another body. And the passion to make a book, passion of the writer smelling glue and ink, sensuous. The writer's dread of making another tombstone, my marker, orderly in its place in the stacks, or to infiltrate and inhabit another soul as a splinter of spirit pressed between pages like a wildflower, odorless, brittle. So there's one called Glass, Jar of Pens. Inevitably, there had to be one called Other Hand. This is Other Hand. Other Hand, the lesser twin, the one whose accomplishments and privileges are unshowy, getting to touch the tattoo on my right shoulder, wearing the mitt. I feel its familiar weight and textures as the adroit one rests against it for a moment. They twine fingers. Lefty continues to experience considerable difficulty expressing himself clearly and correctly in writing. Comparison with his brother prevents him from putting forth his best effort. Yet this halt one, too, has felt the breast, thigh, clasped an ankle, or, most intimate of all, the fingers of a hand. And possibly his trembling touch, as less merely adept and confident, is subtly the more welcome of the two. In the Elysian fields, where every defect will be compensated and the last will be first, this one will lead skillfully, while the other will assist. And as my shadow stalks that underworld, the right hand, too, will rejoice, released from its long burden of expectation, the yoke of dexterity finally laid to rest. The book closes. A lot of the book goes back to a kind of adolescent anger and takes a kind of political form. My disappointment in the Bush administration becomes a theme in the book, and there's a lot also of sort of irritation about forgetting. I mean, I was sort of slightly aggressive with you all when I was asking you who was the most popular poet ever. And when I said Edgar Guest, there's that kind of theme of the one who remembers and kind of rage at forgetting and a kind of acceptance of forgetting. And in the very last canto of his Commedia, Dante has a passage about forgetting, and I think it's where he accepts his own death, the extent to which much of him will be forgotten. We remember the great Alighieri, but so much of him is gone. Most of his work survived, not all. So we have the love poems, we have a lot, really, prose and verse. But he confronts how little anybody can ever remember, and he confronts how much is always forgotten. And it gave me a way to end the book on a note that was somewhat, had some peace to it. He uses the Virgilian myth of the Sibyl. Some of you may know that Hopkins poem, wonderful, strange, Gerard Manley Hopkins poem, spelt from Sibyl's leaves. The Sibyl was an oracle who knew everything. The Sibyl knew everything that would ever happen. And she wrote it down. She wrote down everything that had ever happened and would ever happen. She wrote down all knowledge. And she wrote it on these delicate, thin leaves. And people loathed her and her temple, says Virgil. The reason they loathed her is that as soon as the door to the Sibyl's temple began to turn, a little breeze went in and sent the leaves up into chaos, so that no one could ever read what she wrote, because it was written on these superfine leaves. So it's an image of knowledge as conceivable but unattainable. And for me, it was a way to end the book. And to me, it's also, as a teacher, one has to accept limitation also, as in every other pursuit. A thing we say to very young teachers sometimes is, you're not going to make every student in the class into an absolutely effective writer. You're not going to have every student in the class become a sensitive, devoted reader of literature. You're going to try to help as many of them as you can, as much as you can, and try as hard as you can not to harm any of them. Which, we should take the same oath as the doctors, because it's possible, and very inadvertently sometimes we do harm people. If you do this profession for 30 or 40 years, somebody will remember you as having harmed them. Sad. And we have to face it. It comes with all the joy, we're so lucky. You do it for a few years, there are hundreds of people who are thinking about you, who remember you, and you hope that many of them will be grateful to you for something or other. Anyway, this is my poem. It's a terza rima translation of a passage in Dante, and I will close with From the Last Canto of Paradise. From the Last Canto of Paradise, Paradiso 33, lines 46, 48, 52, 66. As I drew nearer to the end of all desire, I brought my longing's ardor to a final height, just as I ought. My vision becoming pure, entered more and more the beam of that high light that shines on its own truth. From then, my seeing became too large for speech, which fails at a sight beyond all boundaries, at memory's undoing. As when the dreamer sees, and after the dream, the passion endures, imprinted on his being, though he can't recall the rest. I am the same. Inside my heart, although my vision is almost entirely faded, droplets of its sweetness come the way the sun dissolves the snow's crust, the way in the wind that stirred the light leaves, the oracle that the Sibyl wrote was lost.